As Hurricane Milton has made its way across central Florida and left millions without power, millions had to evacuate, and unfortunately, a few dozen Americans have, lost their lives. It leaves us thinking about the different factors that went in and around this hurricane, including climate change, labor rights, and unfortunately, a lot of people who are left behind due to the strains of capitalism. I'm here to talk about all this today with a friend of the show, Natalie Bencivenga, award-winning journalist and host of the KDKA show, in conversation with Natalie Bencivenga. Natalie, how are you doing today? Thank you for coming back on the show.
Oh, I'm happy to be here, Desmond, and thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So Hurricane Milton has
Yeah.
been a topic of discussion, like over the national airwaves over the last,
Mhm.
week or so, as we saw it strengthening in the Gulf of Mexico, at
Mhm.
one point becoming a Category 5 hurricane. A lot of people very concerned about the impacts of climate change and how these storms are getting more and more dangerous. It may landfall as a Category 3 in Central Florida. We still don't know the levels of devastation that will be from the hurricane, like as the time that we are recording this. But, outside of the actual damage that it caused or,
Mhm.
just how much money it's going to take to rebuild parts of Central Florida, there's a lot of other intersecting stories around this. And that's what I wanted to talk to you about today. So I want to open the floor to you. When you think about the devastation left by Milton, what are some of the surrounding stories around this hurricane that have kind of caught your attention throughout all of this?
I have to tell you this, and it's funny, and as somebody that works in media, there are probably certain stories that for whatever reason get caught right here in your throat. And you can't explain necessarily why, but there's something about them that make you take pause and reflect on our larger state of humanity. And when I saw the one meteorologist crying, getting choked up, talking about the impact that the climate crisis is having and how hot the oceans are getting and how it is literally changing the way that we talk about climate disasters and climate activity. It just gave me pause because all of the things that we've been warning about for decades now are now coming into fruition. And when I started to read about the impact that Milton is having or was going to have, the impact that we know Hurricane Helene has had recently because it made its way, through the Gulf and into the Carolinas, it just got me thinking about who is being left out of this narrative and who's not being centered in these stories. And doing a lot of reading, I started reading about prison populations that were literally left to sit in their own feces for days, being trapped in their cells in various states across the country because no one was coming to save them or to support them. People that had no way to evacuate because they didn't have the means to travel. They didn't have a car. They didn't have the money. All the hotels were booked. The flights all of a sudden had rocketed in price to get
Right.
out of these spaces. That really concerns me when we start talking about unfettered capitalism. And then the labor issues around the fact that people were being told to come to work on the
Oh,
day or the day before that this hurricane, or hurricanes in this case, because they're
yeah.
happening so fast and close together, were supposed to hit. And the reality that this comes down to lack of choice. And then it got me thinking about the whole conversation around bodily autonomy. And I know this seems like a stretch, but I think this all goes back to this narrative of if you do not have control over your body, you do not have control over your life. And whether that's around abortion rights or labor rights, someone telling you that if you leave because of a natural disaster, you will lose your job, which means you lose your livelihood, potentially your home. You have no choice over your life. And so, for all of those intersections, I just wanted to bring that to the forefront so we could work to connect those dots.
Yeah, no, it is something that has been just truly breathtaking to see some of these
Yeah.
stories kind of play through. I think, for instance, the story that we saw out of Tennessee, that Tennessee plastic plant,
Oh,
where, I think it was like a couple dozen people lost their lives, what was it, during Hurricane Helene. And
mhm.
they were showing at that time that, the person who, was the owner of the plant, just wouldn't allow those people to leave until, what was it, 45 minutes prior to the
Yeah,
storm getting into the area. Or and
which
you
is
also,
nothing.
yeah. How are you going to escape that quickly? First
Yeah.
of all, I mean, truthfully speaking, especially we don't even know the layout of that town. How long does it take to get out of the town
Mm-mm.
itself, let alone to get out of the area, in general for where the hurricane would be? These things, go for, like just hundreds of miles at a time sometimes.
Well,
So
what if you have one car and you live a half an hour from work and your family is waiting for you at home? So you have to drive home, get them, and then try to evacuate. Like, there's just so many other circumstances that could be
right.
impacting this as well. It's an insane thing to think about that someone would say you can't leave work even though this storm is coming.
What would you say to the company?
Why'd you make us work that day? Why? We shouldn't have worked. We shouldn't have been there. None of us should have been there. And that's what I should have said to them. Why did you make us work when you knew you said in your statement you were monitoring it? Why did you make us stay and work? It breaks my heart for them people that we lost. They were good. Every one of them were good people. I work with them every day. And we were like family. We cut up, we joked there. And it broke my heart to see that they died and that they didn't make it. All because of greed, I think.
We saw reports online that workers at Disney World were actually being asked to stay, like at Disney World itself, like up until like I think just the day before Hurricane Milton, actually made landfall, where we were seeing plenty of videos that there were thousands, if not millions, of people evacuating the Tampa Bay in the Orlando areas just, on Tuesday and on Monday. And the fact that Disney was keeping people there even on Wednesday, hours before the storm was going to make landfall, just absolutely inexcusable to me. We also saw on More Perfect Union, people talking about how the things they really need to worry about were the earnings that Disney might lose because of the storm, and how that was actually, the thing that we should be focusing on right now. It is a bleak picture of society where we are just devaluing human lives to this point, to where we're focusing more on like, well, hey, we got to keep this theme park open, or think about the earnings we might lose, or like, what are we even talking about here? It's absolutely gross to me, Natalie. I mean, like, is that some of the things that were kind of coming through for you when you were first seeing some of these stories come on?
This to me is end stage capitalism eating itself. I mean, whether we want to admit it or not, the
Yeah.
world is changing. We
Yeah.
have got to adapt or we are going to perish. And people are already dying. And the reality is, hurricanes don't give a flying you know what about your fourth quarter or earnings, right? And
Right.
we need to start waking up to the reality that our addiction to fossil fuels is destroying our lives and our planet. And if you care about the economy, and I think we all do, it's also going to destroy our ability to have livelihoods. I mean, we have seen the city of Asheville, for example, in North Carolina, which its basically entire sort of revenue was around people coming to visit. They thought, hey, this is a safe place. We're in a valley. We're in North Carolina in the mountains. We're protected from
Right.
climate change. We now know no one is protected. And the extremeness of these storms is continue to ramp up and up and up. And I was reading this one, climate scientist was talking about we've passed like 6 of the 9 sort of climate boundaries, meaning like there are certain things that we're not going to be able to reverse at this point. And as the waters continue to heat up, the extremeness of these storms is going to not only create havoc in the coastal areas, but it's going to create havoc all over the country, all over the world as well. And so I guess my question is, what is it going to take before we as a people say enough is enough in this country and we go on general strike? Like, that's what I'm waiting for. Seriously, Desmond.
I mean, I think one of the problems here, and one of the problems that we are facing is just the rampant amount of disinformation.
Yes.
Unfortunately, there is an excess amount, I think it's a disproportionate amount of like a domination of conservative media right now, especially in the new media space, the independent space.
That's right.
Most of the major podcasts, major YouTube shows, they are absolutely dominated by the Tucker Carlsons, the Joe Rogans, the Russell Brands, the Jordan Petersons, the Ben Shapiros, the Candace Owens. I mean, they kind of dominate the top 10, and they are pushing things like climate change isn't real, but if you want to think about the climate changing, it's actually, the Democrats controlling the weather. Did you not hear about that? It is laughable how easily they can make up nothing and then have it dominate the, just the social, I mean, like the zeitgeist just immediately, and we have to battle against that in real time on the right, while on the left having to deal with a Democratic Party which is just as much, if not even more so in certain cases, dominated by the corruption that comes from money in politics, the fossil fuel industry. We are seeing a Biden administration that currently is actually authorizing more oil and gas permits than the Trump administration did. And for those of us who are talking about how important climate change is to us, to see a Democratic president actually surpass a Republican president in that kind of a figure, it kind of really takes the wind out of your sails when they then try to come back to you and talk to you about how important climate change is. But I'll also note that we haven't really heard that much from Kamala Harris about climate change in this particular campaign.
Well, all we've heard is that she's not going to ban fracking. So
that's all,
and she's proud of it.
And that's all we've heard. And this is the problem. So when you ask what needs to change, I think there needs to be a rebuke of the status quo on the left. Yeah. And then there also needs to be a reckoning with misinformation on the right. I mean, I think those two things have to happen as far as I'm concerned.
1000% agree with you. And I would say, listening to who you rattled off, it's so obvious to me in terms of podcasters and who's sort of dominating this conservative news cycle. It's so obvious to me, right, that capitalism cannot exist without the other two pillars, which are white supremacy and patriarchy. And when we look at all of those men mostly that you rattled off, they are upholding these hierarchies through this misinformation war because they think in this short-term space, it will provide them some small benefit. And the other thing I'd like to add to this conversation that I don't think enough of us talk about, you and I have discussed it from time to time, but something I really want to make sure people think more about is campaign finance reform and the recognition of the fact that if we ever want the things that we all deserve, which is universal health care, free education, childcare, paid leave, a living wage, affordable housing, none of that, gun laws, obviously a new Green Deal that's actually substantial, none of that will ever happen if we continue to elect people who are not committed to getting money out of politics, as well as setting term limits on themselves and their own jobs and overturning Citizens United. I am convinced that until those three things start to actually happen, we're not going to be able to get any of these things done, because the elephant in the room, and it's not a Republican elephant or anything like that, but just the elephant in the room to me is the fact that corporations have been running our government for the past several decades. And most of us are just now starting to wake up to what some of us have been saying for years.
Yeah, no, the continued enlightenment, I think, people learning more and more about what's going on, as, independent media kind of flourishes, not just on like places like YouTube or in the TikTok space, but also, I mean, not just in YouTube or like the podcast space, but also on TikTok, on Instagram. We are seeing lots of new, I guess, like, the influencer economy, of people creating more and more content about the news. That is having a profound impact on the younger generations, the 35, the 40 and under crowd. I think that it is really becoming pervasive, and it's allowing people to understand much more about the world around them than they ever did previously. And I think that will pay dividends over time, which is probably why certain figures like Hillary Clinton are advocating that we kind of need more control over the information swirling on social media. I can only imagine why, she would say something like that.
Well, but yeah, it's funny that you brought that up, because right before we did this show, just a quick little story. I had posted an Instagram reel that I did focusing on debunking the myths around FEMA. And the minute I posted it to TikTok, it was quickly removed. And it said it was violating community guidelines for misinformation and election integrity. And I appealed it. And within an hour, it was restored. This is maybe the 6th or 7th time in the past 3 weeks that this has happened to my content. And so what I find hilarious about that is I am not the one that is spreading any kind of misinformation. You will not. And if I ever do get something wrong, you can damn well be sure I will make a correction and I will make it publicly known, because I really do believe in building transparent, trustworthy media with the people that are consuming what I'm putting out there. But it just made me laugh, because I think of what I see on TikTok and I'm thinking, and I got banned for misinformation. So this is the other issue that we're dealing with, is that these platforms that claim to be sort of spaces for free thinking are starting to crack down. But it's odd that they always seem to be cracking down on the people that are trying to correct misinformation. I find that funny.
I think talking about the dangerous place that we're in with platforms and how much power they have over our society. Definitely a whole separate conversation. We're definitely going to have that one another time. Natalie, thank you so much for coming on the show today. Where can people find you at online if they want to see more of your content?
Well, speaking of TikTok, I'm on TikTok, I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook, I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Twitter, I'm on Threads, and you can go to @Natalie Bencivenga. And you can also check out my website at nataliebencivenga.com. And I am on the radio, which you can stream every week if you'd like, kdkaradio.com. And then I do a web series with Penn Capital Star called Facts Over Fear. And you can go to their website, penn-capital-star. And Desmond, I can't wait to have you back on my radio show very soon.
Hey, you know, the radio is challenging, but I'm always up for it.
You do a great job.
For those who like this episode, please go ahead and hit the like button on the video and subscribe to our channel for more episodes in the future. We will see you in the next one. Thank you for watching this video of Independent Thought. If you liked the conversation, please go ahead and give the video itself a like and be sure to subscribe for future episodes on the channel.